This is Crystal Stanich, and thank you for joining me for this week's First Chapter Friday. Today, I will be reading the first chapter of Hurricane Season by Lauren K. Denton. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 1, Betsy. She usually stayed in bed until at least 6, but this morning she was restless, like animals get when the barometric pressure drops before a storm. It wasn't the cows, or the approaching hurricane season, or even the milk prices, which had dipped lately. It was something else, something she couldn't quite name. She felt like she needed to run both a mile and go back to sleep for the next 3 hours. It was energy and lethargy, anticipation and dread. Annabeth would likely diagnose it in a heartbeat, but Betsy had always been good at pretending everything was just fine. She kicked her legs out from under the sheet, her feet searching for a cool spot in the bed Ty had just vacated. Even with the windows closed and the AC pumping, heat still seeped in, filling the cracks and crevices of her old house with thick Alabama heat. The meteorologists on the news last night had been in a frenzy as they pointed out heat waves radiating across the country. It was only mid-June, but 2 tropical waves had already rolled off the shores of Africa. Thankfully, they fizzled out before reaching land. We likely won't be so lucky later in the summer, the forecasters thundered, striking terror into the hearts of all those living near the coast, including those in Betsy's small town of Eleanor, 15 miles north of the Gulf of Mexico. The most active hurricane forecast in 2 decades, NOAA predicted with eager excitement. El Niño this, La Niña that. Everyone had a handy explanation for the coming tide of heat and storms that promised to pummel South Alabama and surrounding coastal areas. But Betsy had her own ideas. This summer, she turned 30. Not as big a milestone as 40, but it was a milestone nonetheless. The idea of 30 had always felt maternal, heavy with maturity and substance. While everyone else was talking about the fanfare of an active season, every word punctuated by an exclamation point, all she felt was a slow hiss of air. It leaked gradually, lazily, not so quickly that anyone else would notice, but she felt it. Like a slow but steady lightning. Downstairs, the toe of Ty's boot beat out a rhythm on the kitchen floor as he waited for the coffee to finish dripping. She heard his jumbo-sized metal coffee mug scrape across the shelf and thunk down on the counter. The coffee pouring into the mug, the carafe sliding back into place on the hot pad. She imagined Ty's face, prickly with the night's passage. His hands, big and warm, knuckles sticking out from his long, sturdy fingers. His brushed silver wedding ring. When the screen door thudded closed, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. She grabbed a clip from her nightstand and twisted her long brown waves up into a bun. Then pulled her light cotton robe around her shoulders and padded into the kitchen. At the window over the sink, she brushed aside the curtain to peek into the backyard. Ty made his way across the dewy grass to the barn. Only the curves of his shoulders were visible in the moonlight. The coffee was good and hot, scorching her throat on the way down. After pulling her breakfast casserole out of the fridge and popping it in the oven, she opened the back door. Damp morning air met her face with a whisper. On the porch, Etta was curled up in a tight ball in her favorite spot on the couch. Betsy couldn't stand the layer of fur Etta always left behind, but the cat was too cuddly to stay mad at for long. She reached down and scratched Etta's chin and behind her ears. When she pushed open the screen door, Etta jumped down from the couch and slid between Betsy's feet. By the time Betsy reached the bottom of the porch steps, the cat was already halfway to the barn to check for spilled milk. Crossing the yard, she inhaled the aroma of damp grass, earthy hay, and fresh sawdust coming from the henhouse. It was the same henhouse generations of Ty's family had used on this property. She and Ty had repaired as necessary and added extra space a few times to accommodate more hens. But the house was basically the same. Not a typical box made of wood and screen. It had a shingled roof, weathered wood siding, even the screen porch. A trumpet vine covered in long red flowers climbed one corner post, and a gravel walkway snaked around the side. Some mornings, when dewy fog hung heavy over the farm and everything was blurry and half erased, Betsy imagined the henhouse as a home for fairies or hobbits. The hens got anxious if she robbed them of their eggs too early in the morning, so she crept in quietly, eased the door closed behind her, and locked it to keep the determined hens from making a quick escape. The interior was full of quiet clucking. The hens were mostly content, but Betsy knew from experience that exasperation at her intrusion wasn't far off. "Good morning, little mamas," she murmured as she pulled out 8 brown eggs, lightly speckled, 2 yellow, and 1 as blue as a robin's egg. "Worked hard this morning, didn't you?" She placed the eggs in the basket hanging by the door, then scattered a few scoops of feed across the ground. The hens fluttered down from their perches to dine, all indignities forgiven. With the henhouse door locked tight behind her, she paused before turning back to the house. It often stopped her, the beauty, almost perfection, of their little space on this earth. Franklin Dairy Farm, the land Ty had worked and shaped and brought to life. The sky was now streaked with bold purples and blues, bright pinks and yellows. Oaks and hickories, tall, thick, and majestic, dotted their 500 acres. She could hear the steady whoosh, whoosh of the milking machines, even out here in the yard. Faint strains of Chris Stapleton's Tennessee whiskey floated out of the speakers Ty and Walker had jiggered up in the nooks and crannies of the barn. Through the steadily increasing light, she could just make out Ty's outline as he stooped over a cow hooked up to a machine. Ty was thick, but not overweight, just solid, as if he could carry the weight of the world on his shoulders and not buckle or even protest. She liked that about him when they first started dating, and it hadn't changed. She thought about going out to the barn and kissing him good morning. It would surprise him, delight him. She closed her eyes and could feel his lips, warm and soft, faint prickles at the edges. He'd still smell like sleep, but also like oats, grass, and good outside air. She opened her eyes, lips tingling, and grabbed the basket of eggs off its hook. The eggs clattered against each other, but didn't break. Instead of turning toward the barn, she retraced her steps back to the house, keeping her head down to avoid the 2 ant beds that always magically reappeared, always in the same place, the morning after she poured vinegar and boiled water over them. It was amazing. They had the most industrious animals, even insects, on their property. Ants that did nothing but work, just as they were supposed to. Cows overflowing with maternal milk. Hens that offered eggs each morning without fail, their bodies giving forth life as they should. Even Etta had once offered them a litter of kittens, much to their surprise. It seemed everybody on the farm consistently obeyed God's natural order of things, producing and giving life, working and contributing as they should. Betsy sidestepped the ant mounds, and when she looked up, the first thing she saw was the swing, moving slowly in the breeze. The swing hung from the lowest branch of the sweeping oak tree in the backyard. The tree was like something from Grimm's fairy tales. It sat in the middle of an otherwise treeless yard, its limbs extending 20, 30 feet from the trunk, arms of Spanish moss swaying in the breeze, fingers of ivy trailing up and across the limbs. The shade underneath was thick and dark, always at least 15 degrees cooler than the heat-saturated yard. It was the kind of tree Betsy and her sister Jenna would have loved to have had in their backyard growing up, a backdrop to their adventures, even if most of their adventures were only in their minds. Under the swing was a dirt patch where broods of kids, including Ty, had swung their feet trailing in the dirt and stomping out the grass. That swing was the first thing Ty had showed Betsy when he brought her to the farm their senior year of college. They'd been together for about a year, but it wasn't until she saw this place that she understood who he really was and what a life with him would look like. When he had pointed out the swing, she was confused at first. "The swing?" she asked him. "You want to take over your grandfather's farm because of a wooden swing?" "No, not the swing. The farm will be profitable. I can make a few changes and get this place running smoother than lake water. It's going to be great." Then he put his hands on her shoulders and turned her so she faced the swing directly. "Tell me what you see there." "Wood, dirt, a tree." "I see children," he said. "I hear laughter. I see a childhood spent outside in the heat and air and light. I see our future." Staring at that swing now, Betsy took a deep breath and squeezed her eyes closed, then opened them again. The swing swayed back and forth on an invisible breeze. With her free hand, she brushed back a lock of hair that had escaped her clip and started for the house. On her way past the swing, she raised her leg and gave it a swift, hard kick. And that is the end of Chapter 1 of Hurricane Season by Lauren K. Denton. This title is available for download on Hoopla, and if you are interested in what happens next, check it out. Have a great week.